The country club chandeliers glittered like false promises as I straightened my uniform collar. Badge polished, gun holstered, a warrior walking into enemy territory. My own family's territory. Still single, Ro? No wonder, you're married to a radio and a night shift. Their laughter cut deeper than any knife I'd faced on patrol. They called me the lonely cop that night at my brother's promotion party, dismissing my career as some sad consolation prize. What they didn't understand about quiet, overlooked officers like me is that we see everything. Every betrayal. Every lie. Every corruption. And when the police chief walked in with evidence that would shatter their perfect world, they'd finally learn what I'd known all along. The most dangerous person in a room is the one nobody bothers to notice. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed. The lights of the country club sparkled like false promises as I pulled into the parking lot. I straightened my uniform in the rearview mirror, tugging at the collar that suddenly felt too tight. 10 years on the force, and I still felt like I had something to prove every time I put it on. Especially tonight. Camden's Lexus sat front and center in the reserved space marked Guest of Honor. My brother, the golden child, was being promoted to VP at Tech Future Industries. Meanwhile, I'd parked my department-issued Dodge Charger between a Mercedes and a BMW. The contrast wasn't lost on me. I took a deep breath before walking through those double doors. Inside, crystal chandeliers cast warm light over the sea of designer suits and cocktail dresses. And there I was, Officer Rowena Taylor in full uniform, the only person wearing a badge instead of Versace. My mother spotted me first. Valerie Taylor, with her perfectly coiffed silver blonde hair and perpetual Botox smile, glided over with a flute of champagne. "Rowena, darling, you came in your work clothes." She lowered her voice on the last two words, as if work clothes was a euphemism for something obscene. "I came straight from my shift, Mom." She pressed the champagne into my hand. "Well, at least have a drink. Camden's making his speech soon. I'm still on call." She sighed. Always so dedicated to staying small. The barb stung as she intended. I'd learned long ago that in the Taylor household, ambition was measured in stock options and corner offices, not in lives saved or communities protected. Across the room, my sister-in-law Tasha caught my eye. She was a former beauty queen with the personality of a weather vane, always pointing in whatever direction the strongest Taylor wind was blowing. Tonight, she floated over in a cloud of expensive perfume. "Ro, you made it." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Camden was just saying he wasn't sure if you'd be able to get away from, what is it you handle again? Parking violations. Homicide calls, actually. Last night."
"Oh."
Her smile flickered. "How interesting." She leaned in, whispering, "You know, my friend Abigail's husband works at the FBI. Now that's fascinating work. Have you ever considered federal?" Before I could answer, a chime rang through the hall. Everyone turned toward the small stage where my brother stood, champagne raised high. Camden Taylor was what magazines called classically handsome, strong jaw, perfect teeth, and the confidence of a man who'd never heard the word no. His tailored suit probably cost more than 3 months of my salary. "Friends, family, colleagues, thank you all for coming tonight," he began, voice carrying effortlessly across the room. "They say success is a ladder, but I prefer to think of it as an elevator. Some of us are destined to rise." His gaze flickered to me for just a second, while others, well, choose to wear uniforms instead of suits. Laughter rippled through the crowd. I felt heat crawl up my neck, but kept my face neutral, a skill honed through years of interrogations and traffic stops. My father approached from behind, clapping a heavy hand on my shoulder. Horace Taylor, former state senator, now a consultant who made more money advising companies than most people saw in a lifetime. "At least Camden will own a company someday, not just wear a badge, Arrow," he said, just loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "Some people aim for the stars, others are content with a brass button." I forced a smile. "Some of us prefer to serve rather than be served, Dad." His eyes narrowed. Always the idealist. Still chasing that approval you never got in college. The mention of college sent a familiar ache through my chest. Nobody in this room knew what had really happened during my senior year at Westlake University, the betrayal that had pushed me away from corporate law and toward a badge. The memory still burned. As Camden's speech continued, I retreated to a corner, checking my phone. A text from Kyla lit up the screen. "How's the fancy party going?" Detective Kyla Brinks had been my partner and best friend for the past 5 years. She knew exactly what these family gatherings cost me emotionally. I texted back, "It's fine." A lie she'd see through immediately, but I couldn't bring myself to admit how much it still hurt. From across the room, I noticed a man in a dark suit watching me. Unlike the others, his attention seemed curious rather than judgmental. I didn't recognize him as one of Camden's colleagues or my father's political connections. Something about his steady gaze made me uneasy. As the night wore on, the comments grew more pointed. Cousins asking when I'd find a nice man and settle down. Uncles wondering if I'd hit the ceiling in my career. Through it all, I maintained the same neutral expression I used at crime scenes. It wasn't until after Camden's third toast that someone, one of his fraternity brothers, made the comment that would echo in my mind for days. "Still single, Ro?" he called out, voice slurring slightly. "No wonder, you're married to a radio and a night shift." The lonely cop of the Taylor family. The room erupted in laughter. Even my mother covered her smile with a napkin. In that moment, I thought about my application for lieutenant sitting on Captain Morley's desk, mysteriously delayed for the 3rd time with no explanation. I thought about the hours I'd spent building cases, the nights without sleep, the families I'd comforted after delivering the worst news imaginable. All of it suddenly felt hollow under the weight of their laughter. I excused myself to the bathroom, splashing cold water on my face. My phone buzzed, an unknown number. Probably a wrong number or a telemarketer. But when I answered, the voice was low and distorted. "You don't know who's watching, but they see you, Officer Taylor. Be careful." I dismissed it as a prank and headed back to the party. But the next day, that call would take on a whole new meaning. The following morning, I pulled over a black SUV with tinted windows for running a red light. Standard procedure. Approach the driver's side, request license and registration. But as I neared the vehicle, the back door flew open. I barely had time to react before the muzzle flash. My backup arrived 4 minutes later than protocol, just long enough for me to nearly bleed out on the asphalt. Just long enough to wonder if the call had been a warning after all. The antiseptic smell of the hospital room couldn't mask the lingering scent of gunpowder that seemed embedded in my nostrils. 3 days after the traffic stop, and I still woke up reaching for my weapon. The doctor called it a close call. The bullet had missed my carotid artery by centimeters. But what kept me awake wasn't the pain or the nightmares. It was the 4-minute delay in backup. 4 minutes is a lifetime, I muttered, wincing as I pulled on my shirt. Against medical advice, I was checking myself out today. My phone buzzed with another text from Kyla. "Don't you dare leave that hospital bed. I'm coming to get you." 20 minutes later, Kyla Brinks stormed through the door. At 5'4" with wild auburn hair and a perpetual scowl, she looked more like an angry librarian than one of the precinct's top detectives. "You're an idiot, Taylor," she said, dropping a bag of clothes on the bed. "A stubborn, thick-headed idiot. Love you too, partner." Her expression softened. "For minutes, Ro. That wasn't an accident." I nodded slowly. We both knew standard response time was under 2 minutes for an officer in potential danger. The dispatch logs showed my backup had been redirected twice before finally heading my way. "Harper claims there was a system glitch," Kyla said, referring to the dispatch officer. "But I've been doing some digging. And you're not the first. 3 other officers had similar glitches in the past year. All women, all up for promotion." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the hospital air conditioning. That call I got at Camden's party might not have been a prank after all. Later that day, I found myself in Captain Morley's office. Gerald Morley had been running our precinct for 15 years, a bureaucrat to his core who seemed to view actual police work as an inconvenient distraction from his paperwork. "Officer Taylor," he said without looking up from his computer. You should be resting. I'd like to discuss my promotion application, sir. His fingers paused over the keyboard. Your application is still under review. It's been under review for 4 months, Captain. Standard procedure is 6 weeks. He finally looked up, his expression carefully neutral. Police work isn't about standard procedures, Taylor. It's about readiness. Timing. And frankly, the timing isn't right. Is it ever going to be right, sir? A flash of something, irritation, worry, crossed his face. That'll be all, officer. As I turned to leave, he added, I heard about your family's celebration the other night. Your brother's quite successful, isn't he? Must be hard, living in that shadow. I froze. How did he know about Camden's party? I hadn't mentioned it to anyone at the precinct except Kyla. Outside in the parking lot, Kyla was waiting with 2 coffees. He stonewalled you again, didn't he? I nodded, taking the coffee. He also knew about Camden's party. Kyla's eyes narrowed. That's concerning. She hesitated. Ro, there've been whispers around the precinct. Rumors about the promotion system. What kind of rumors? The kind that get people transferred to traffic duty in the worst parts of town. Favoritism. Cover-ups. Maybe something darker. She lowered her voice. It might be why your application keeps getting lost. As we talked, a commotion near the precinct entrance caught our attention. A small group of protesters had gathered, led by a tall man with intense eyes and a megaphone. Julian Rios, Kyla explained. Community organizer. Been raising hell about police misconduct for months. I'd seen his name in reports, but never met him. Watching him now, there was something compelling about his passion, even if it was directed against my department. You think there's anything to his claims? I asked. Kyla shrugged. 6 months ago, I'd have said absolutely not. Now, I'm not so sure. My phone rang again, unknown number. I answered warily. Officer Taylor? A male voice asked. Familiar, but I couldn't place it. Who's asking? An old friend. Meet me at Riverside Park, North Entrance. 1 hour. The line went dead. I stared at the phone. I think I just got summoned. Kyla frowned. By whom? I'm about to find out. Riverside Park was nearly empty at this hour. The North Entrance, shadowed by oak trees, offered privacy and limited escape routes. I kept one hand near my weapon as I approached the bench where a lone figure sat watching the water. When he turned, the world seemed to tilt beneath my feet. Hello, Ro. Lucian Black, FBI's special agent. The man who'd disappeared from my life 6 years ago without a word after working a joint task force. You've got to be kidding me, I said, fighting the urge to either punch him or run. 6 years of silence, and now you just show up? He looked older, a few threads of silver in his dark hair, lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. But the intensity was the same. I know you have questions. Questions? I laughed bitterly. That's putting it mildly. You disappeared in the middle of an operation. I thought you were dead until the Bureau finally told me you'd been reassigned. I didn't have a choice, Ro. His voice was tight. I was ordered to cut contact. To protect you. Save it. I turned to leave. I know about the traffic stop, he called after me. And about your stalled promotion. It's why I'm here. I stopped. What are you talking about? I'm investigating a case that involves your precinct. Corruption at levels you wouldn't believe. His eyes met mine. And someone has flagged you as a threat. 2 days later, I found myself enduring another family gathering, this time a brunch at my parents' West Side mansion. The doctor had advised against stress. Clearly, he'd never met the Taylors. I still don't understand why you went back to work so soon, my mother said, pouring more mimosa than orange juice into her flute. Surely the department would give you proper time to recover from your incident. It was a shooting, Mom, not an incident. Well, it's hardly appropriate brunch conversation. Camden, slicing into his eggs Benedict, smirked. Bet that doesn't happen to the higher-ups. Probably why Ro should have aimed a little higher than beat cop. I'm a detective now, Camden. For what, 5 years? I've had 3 promotions in that time. I bit back a retort, remembering Lucien's warning. Keep a low profile. Don't tip anyone off. We had agreed to meet later to go through the files he'd begun collecting. My father cleared his throat. Your brother makes a good point, Rowena. You wear that badge to cover your insecurities. Always have. Ever since that business in college. The room went silent. We never talked about that business. I think we're done here, I said, standing up. Thanks for brunch. As I walked to my car, I noticed a piece of paper tucked under my windshield wiper. Not a parking ticket, a note, printed in block letters. Watching you. That night, after checking my apartment twice for signs of intrusion, I met Lucien at an abandoned warehouse on the edge of town. The irony of the cloak and dagger rendezvous wasn't lost on me. This better be worth it, I said, shivering in the damp air. Lucien opened his laptop, turning it toward me. 5 years of internal documents, promotion records, disciplinary actions, transfer requests. He clicked on a folder labeled Red Flag Personnel. What am I looking at? Officers who've been systematically kept from advancing. Notice anything? I scrolled through the names. All women, all minorities, all with exemplary service records. And there, third from the bottom, Taylor Rowena A. Why am I on this list? Lucien opened my file. Most of it contained information I knew, performance reviews, commendations, the usual. But there was one document I'd never seen before, a disciplinary report dated 3 years ago, citing insubordination and conduct unbecoming an officer. I've never seen this report, I said, feeling my chest tighten. This never happened. Exactly, Lucien said grimly. It's fabricated. All of these red-flagged officers have similar fabricated reports. It's how they justify keeping you from advancing. But why me? Why any of us? That's what we need to find out. Captain Morley's office felt smaller the second time around. Maybe it was the knowledge I now carried, or maybe it was the way he seemed to watch my every movement with thinly disguised suspicion. You're requesting access to your personnel file? He leaned back in his chair. May I ask why? I kept my expression neutral, channeling every interrogation technique I'd learned. Just doing some career planning, sir. I'd like to see where I stand. Where you stand. He repeated the words slowly. And this sudden interest in your career trajectory wouldn't have anything to do with your conversation with Agent Black, would it? My heart stuttered. He knew about Lucien. I'm not sure what you mean, sir. Come now, Taylor. We both know you met with an FBI agent 2 days ago. What I don't know is why. His smile didn't reach his eyes, especially given that there's no active FBI investigation involving our precinct. I thought fast. Agent Black is an old colleague from a joint task force years ago. We were just catching up. In an abandoned warehouse? Odd choice for a reunion. I stood up, abandoning the pretense. Am I under surveillance, Captain? He sighed as if disappointed. You've been acting erratically since the shooting, Taylor. Skipping medical leave. Asking questions above your pay grade. We're concerned. We? Who's we? Instead of answering, he pushed a folder across the desk. Your personnel file, as requested. You'll find everything in order. But we both knew that wasn't true. Later that afternoon, I met Kyla at a diner across town. She looked tired, with dark circles under her eyes suggesting she hadn't slept much. I've been digging, she said, voice low. Remember Officer Patel? And Sergeant Washington. I nodded. Both had left the force suddenly. Patel transferred to a small-town department upstate. Washington retired early, citing personal reasons. Both were investigating senior officials before they vanished. Patel was looking into evidence mishandling in the Matthews case. Washington was auditing overtime reports. What happened to them? Kyla glanced around before sliding her phone across the table. On it was a text message from an unknown number. Drop it or end up like Patel and Washington. You've been threatened, I said, feeling a chill. We both have. She took back her phone. There's something else. I found a pattern. Officers who push too hard against certain higher-ups suddenly find themselves in dangerous situations. Backup that arrives too late. Evidence that goes missing from their cases. Like my traffic stop. Exactly like your traffic stop. The next day, a message came from Julian Rios, the community organizer I'd seen protesting. He wanted to meet. Against my better judgment and Kyla's explicit advice, I agreed. Julian chose a community garden in the heart of the district I patrolled. He was younger up close than he'd appeared from a distance, maybe early 30s, with intelligent eyes that seemed to assess everything. "Officer Taylor," he said, extending his hand. "Thank you for coming." "It's detective, actually. Not lieutenant? With your record, I'm surprised." I tensed. "How do you know my record?" He smiled thinly. "I make it my business to know the officers in this district, especially the good ones." He handed me a thick manila envelope. "These are copies of internal police documents I've collected over the past 2 years. Complaints that disappeared. Whistleblowers who were silenced. Cases that were buried." I didn't take the envelope. "How did you get these?" "I have sources inside the department. Officers who believe in actual justice, not just the appearance of it." He pushed the envelope closer. "Page 43 might interest you most. It's an old case file. Officer-involved shooting from 5 years ago. Officer Leandra Finch." The name sent a jolt through me. Leandra had been my training officer, killed in the line of duty before I made detective. Her death had been ruled a justified shooting in the course of apprehending an armed suspect. "What about Finch?" My voice sounded strange even to my own ears. "The report names you as first on scene. But you weren't there, were you?" I stared at him. "How could you possibly know that?" "Because the real first responder is in those files too, along with what actually happened to Officer Finch." That night, I couldn't sleep. Julian's files contained information that turned everything I thought I knew about Leandra's death upside down. According to the documents, she hadn't been killed by a suspect at all. She'd been executed after discovering evidence of money laundering through the evidence room. And my name had been added to the report after the fact, tying me to a scene I'd never visited. I called Lucien, who arrived at my apartment within 20 minutes. Together we pored over the files. "This connects to what I've been finding," he said grimly. "Your name appears in multiple falsified reports, always peripherally, always just enough to create a paper trail linking you to problematic cases. But why me? What did I do to get on their radar?" Lucien hesitated. "It might not be what you did. It might be who you are." "Meaning?" "Your father, Horace Taylor. He served on the city's police advisory board for nearly a decade." I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. "My father has nothing to do with this." "Are you sure about that? How well do you really know him, Ro?" The question haunted me all the way to my parents' house the next morning. I hadn't called ahead. I needed to see my father's reaction, unfiltered and unprepared. I found him in his study, surrounded by the trappings of his successful life. Framed photos with politicians, civic awards, the ego wall of a man who considered himself important. "Rowena," he said, not looking up from his newspaper. "Twice in 1 week. To what do I owe the pleasure?" I placed Julian's file on his desk. "Did you know Officer Leandra Finch?" His hand paused, ever so slightly, as he turned the page. "Can't say that I do." "That's strange, because she was investigating corruption in my precinct right before she was killed. The same precinct you oversaw as advisory board chairman." He finally looked up, his expression unreadable. "What exactly are you implying?" "I'm not implying anything. I'm asking why my name appears on reports of incidents I was never involved in. Why my promotion keeps getting mysteriously delayed. Why backup took 4 extra minutes to reach me during a shooting." He sighed, setting down his paper. "You always were stubborn. It's why I had to step in." "Step in? What does that mean?" "It means I pulled strings to keep you where you are. Safe. Away from the kind of cases that get officers killed." His voice was cold, clinical. "Policing was beneath you, Rowena. I tried to let you get it out of your system, but when you started making waves, asking questions, pushing for promotions that would put you in dangerous positions, I had to intervene. I felt sick. You sabotaged my career. I protected you from yourself." He stood up. "Camden understands. He's always understood what's best for this family." "Camden knows about this?" The study door opened, and there was my brother, looking somber but unapologetic. We both agreed it was for your own good, Ro. After what happened in college, you weren't thinking clearly. I looked between them. These men who thought they had the right to control my life from the shadows. You don't get to decide what's best for me. Neither of you do. As I turned to leave, my father called after me. Don't pursue this, Rowena. Some stones are better left unturned. But I was done listening to his warnings. Back at my apartment, I found Lucien waiting. His expression told me something was wrong before he even spoke. We need to talk, he said, following me inside. About why I really left 6 years ago. I braced myself.
I'm listening.
I was investigating corruption within law enforcement agencies across the state. Your precinct was on my radar, but not my primary target.
He paused.
Then I met you, and things got complicated. Complicated how? I started receiving threats. Not against me, against you. Very specific threats from someone who knew exactly how to reach you, where you lived, your routines. His voice tightened. I was ordered to cut contact immediately.
No explanation, no will be.
Just disappear. Why now? Why come back after all this time? Because the case was reopened 3 months ago, and your name is all over the new evidence. Before I could process this, my phone rang. Kyla. Ro, she said, her voice urgent. I found something. A flash drive in Morris's old locker. Officer Morris had died in a car accident last month, a 20-year veteran 2 weeks from retirement. What's on it?
Files. Surveillance.
Including footage of you dating back 5 years. And Ro, it has your name on a list. A target list. My blood ran cold. Where are you now? Headed to the station to secure the evidence. Meet me there in 20. But Kyla never made it to the station. When I arrived, Captain Morley informed me she'd been in an accident. Her brakes had failed on the highway. She was in critical condition. And the flash drive was missing. This is my fault, I told Lucien as we sat in the hospital waiting room. I dragged her into this. You didn't drag her anywhere, he said firmly. Kyla made her choice. Like you made yours? Disappearing without a word. His jaw tightened. That was different. Was it? Or is that just what you tell yourself to sleep at night? I stood up, anger and fear making my voice shake. Everyone around me either betrays me or gets hurt. Maybe I really am just a lonely cop who should learn to stay in her lane.
No.
I'm done. This isn't worth Kyla's life. As I walked away, a nurse approached with an envelope. Detective Taylor? Your partner asked me to give you this before they took her into surgery. Inside was a small key and a note in Kyla's handwriting. Storage Unit 247, West Side Lock and Key. The real drive. Don't trust anyone. That night, Julian Rios texted me an address, a 24-hour diner on the edge of town. When I arrived, he was waiting with a stack of paperwork and a grim expression. Someone tried to frame you today, he said without preamble. A complaint was filed claiming you assaulted a civilian during questioning. Body cam footage was submitted as evidence. My stomach dropped. That's impossible. I haven't questioned anyone in days. I know. The timestamp on the footage conflicts with surveillance from the bank across the street, which clearly shows you getting coffee at the time of the alleged assault. He slid the papers toward me. Someone's getting sloppy. They're trying to discredit you before you can expose them. Or they're trying to force my hand, I said, thinking of the key burning a hole in my pocket. Make me act rashly. Julian studied me for a moment. This is escalating fast, detective. Whatever you found, whatever you're looking for, it's making powerful people nervous. I didn't tell him about Kyla's key or the storage unit. I didn't tell him about my father's confession or Lucien's revelation. Some stones were better left unturned, my father had said. But some truths demanded to be uncovered, no matter the cost. The next morning, I received a certified letter from the department. I had been suspended without explanation, pending an internal investigation. My badge and service weapon were to be surrendered immediately. That night, I returned to my apartment to find the door slightly ajar. Inside, every drawer had been emptied, every cabinet searched. My investigation notes, carefully hidden behind a loose baseboard, were gone. Someone had been watching me all along, and now they were making their move. Rain pounded against the windows of my apartment as I stared at the small key Kyla had entrusted to me before her surgery. 3 days had passed since my suspension. 3 days of watching shadows, checking over my shoulder, and sleeping with my backup weapon under my pillow. The doctors said Kyla was stable but still unconscious. Convenient timing for whoever wanted to keep her silent. I'd been avoiding Lucien's calls. Part of me still couldn't forgive his disappearance 6 years ago, regardless of his reasons. But as lightning flashed across the sky, my phone lit up with a text that changed everything. Turn on Channel 8. Now. The news anchor's voice filled my living room. Breaking news tonight as Police Chief Daxton Varelli returns from medical leave. The chief, who has been absent for 3 months following a cardiac procedure, made this statement earlier today. The camera cut to a tall, broad-shouldered man with steel-gray hair and eyes that seemed to look right through the screen. Chief Varelli was relatively new to our force, brought in from Chicago 2 years ago with promises of modernization and transparency. Most of us had barely worked with him before his medical leave. I am deeply troubled by allegations that have come to my attention during my recovery, he said, his voice resonating with authority. I want to assure the public and every officer in this department that I will personally investigate any claims of misconduct or corruption. The integrity of this badge depends on accountability at every level. My phone buzzed again. He wants to meet you.
Tomorrow. 8 Uhr morgens.
The coffee shop on Pine Street. I texted back. Who is this? The response was immediate. A friend of Leandra Finch. Sleep was impossible after that. By dawn, I was already sitting in a corner booth at the Pine Street Cafe, watching every person who entered with trained suspicion. At precisely 8 a.m., Chief Varelli walked in, alone and in plain clothes, nothing identifying him as law enforcement. He ordered a black coffee before sliding into the seat across from me. Officer Taylor, he said quietly. Or should I say, detective? I'm not sure what I am anymore, sir. My badge is currently sitting in Captain Morley's desk drawer. His eyes, a penetrating blue that seemed to catalog every detail, studied my face. I've reviewed your file. The real one, not the version Morley maintains. Impressive record. Multiple commendations. Glowing reviews from your training officer.
He paused.
Leandra Finch thought highly of you. The mention of Leandra's name made my chest tighten. You knew her? We worked together in Chicago. She transferred here at my recommendation before I arrived. His expression darkened. Her death was convenient for certain parties. Sir, with all due respect, why are you meeting me like this?
I'm suspended.
Under investigation. Because, Detective Taylor, I believe you're the only officer I can trust right now. He leaned forward. I didn't have a heart condition. I was poisoned. Slowly, methodically. It was made to look like natural causes. I felt a chill run through me. You're saying someone in the department tried to kill you? I'm saying that what you've stumbled upon goes deeper than you realize. He slid a napkin across the table.
On it was written an address.
Meet me here tonight. Bring whatever evidence you've collected. And, detective, tell no one. The address led to an abandoned fire station on the outskirts of town. Neutral ground, hard to surveil, multiple exit points. Tactical choice. I arrived early, sweeping the perimeter before texting Lucien. Need backup. Sending location. He replied immediately. On my way. 20 minutes. I couldn't wait. The storage unit key in my pocket felt like it was burning a hole through my jeans. Whatever Kyla had found was important enough to nearly get her killed. I needed to know what it was before meeting the chief. Westside Lock and Key was a nondescript facility near the industrial district. Unit 247 was small, 5 by 5, just large enough for a few boxes. Inside, I found a single plastic container with a combination lock. The code was written on the underside of the lid. Kyla's badge number. Inside the container was a laptop, sealed in plastic, with a sticky note. Password. Leandra 1540. Leandra's name and badge number. My hands trembled as I powered it on. The files were meticulously organized: surveillance logs, bank records, and personnel files, including my own. But what caught my attention was a folder labeled Finch's Insurance. Inside was a video file dated the day of Leandra's death. The footage showed a warehouse interior. Leandra, in plain clothes, was meeting with someone, Captain Morley. They appeared to be arguing. Then Morley reached for his weapon. The video cut out. Attached was a document, Leandra's real case notes. She'd been investigating money laundering through the evidence room, millions of dollars in seized drug money disappearing. And she'd traced it to Morley and 3 other officers, all with connections to my father's police advisory board. When Chief Varelli arrived at the fire station, I was waiting with the laptop. Lucien arrived minutes later, followed unexpectedly by Julian Rios. I asked Rios to join us, the chief explained, noting my surprise. His organization has been documenting cases we need. For the next hour, I laid out everything: the traffic stop, the delayed backup, Kyla's discovery, my father's confession, and finally, Leandra's video. "This is enough to open an official investigation," Varelli said, his expression grim. "But we need to proceed carefully. Morley has powerful friends." "Like my father," I said quietly. Varelli nodded. "Your father was instrumental in creating the system that protects Morley. But I don't believe he knew about Finch's murder." "What's our next step?" Lucien asked. "We build the case properly," Varelli replied. "Official channels by the book. I'll reinstate you immediately, Detective Taylor. We'll need more officers we can trust." "I know too," I said, thinking of the other officers who'd contacted Kyla. "But they're scared." "Tell them they won't be alone this time." As I left the meeting, my phone rang. Kyla was awake. I found her propped up in her hospital bed, bruised but alert. Her first words were, "Did you find it?" "I found it. We're moving forward, Kyla. Chief Varelli is back." Relief washed over her face.
Good.
Because I remembered something else. The night of the crash, someone tampered with my car. I saw a reflection in the garage security mirror. Uniform, captain's bars. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "It wasn't Morley." "Then who?" "Captain Brooks. From Internal Affairs." The revelation sent a jolt through me. Brooks was supposed to be the clean one, the officer who investigated other officers. If he was involved, this conspiracy ran even deeper than we thought. Over the next week, we operated in careful secrecy. Varelli officially reinstated me, citing procedural errors in my suspension. Kyla remained in the hospital, protected by officers Varelli personally vetted. Lucien worked his FBI connections, building a parallel federal case. 2 more officers joined our small circle of trust, Officer Sarah Winters and Detective Mark Sullivan, both of whom had been on the red flag list for years. "We need to set a trap," Winters suggested during a meeting at Varelli's private residence. "Draw them out, force them to make a mistake." Julian had been quietly monitoring police communications through his network of activists. "They're getting nervous. Increased chatter about containment and loose ends. They know something's happening, but not what." "Then we use that," I said. "We leak information, not everything, just enough to make them panic." The plan was simple but risky. Julian would use his media contacts to publish a vague story about upcoming revelations of police corruption. Meanwhile, I would request a meeting with Captain Morley, ostensibly to clear the air about my suspension. The day before the planned leak, I received a package at my apartment, a bullet casing with a note. "Still time to quit." I showed it to Varelli. His expression hardened. "They're escalating. We move now." That night, Nova Bell, Julian's contact at the Tribune, published her teaser article, "Whistleblower Set to Expose Decade of Police Corruption." No names, no specifics, just enough to rattle cages. By morning, the department was buzzing. Morley called an emergency meeting of senior officers. Our informant inside, Sullivan, texted me. Boardroom. 3 p.m. Full house. Everything was set. At 3 p.m., Nova would release the full story online, simultaneous with our presentation of evidence to Internal Affairs and the district attorney. But at noon, Sullivan sent another text. Meeting moved up. Starting now. I was across town meeting with Lucien and the FBI team. If I didn't make it to that meeting, our entire plan would collapse. Go, Lucien said, already grabbing his keys. I'll bring the feds. Just stall them until we arrive. I broke every traffic law racing to the precinct, badge in one hand, Leandra's laptop in the other. As I burst through the boardroom doors, every head turned my way, Morley, Brooks, and a dozen senior officers, including my father and, surprisingly, Camden. What is the meaning of this? Morley demanded. Chief Forelli, already seated at the head of the table, nodded slightly to me. Detective Taylor has some information relevant to our discussion. She's suspended, Brooks interjected. She shouldn't be here. Actually, Forelli said calmly, I reinstated Detective Taylor 5 days ago. And I believe what she has to say is something we all need to hear. The boardroom fell silent as I connected Leandra's laptop to the projector. My hands were steady now, the nervous energy replaced by a cold clarity. 6 years ago, I began. Officer Leandra Finch was investigating discrepancies in the evidence room. Money from drug busts that never made it to the official logs. She discovered a pattern of theft and money laundering that implicated senior officers in this department. Morley's face remained impassive, but I noticed a slight tightening around his eyes. Brooks fidgeted with his pen. Officer Finch documented everything. I continued, pulling up the first file. Bank records showing deposits that coincided with missing evidence. Communication logs. And this. The video of Leandra's final confrontation with Morley filled the screen. The room erupted in murmurs. This is fabricated, Morley said, his voice controlled. Obviously doctored. The metadata says otherwise, Chief Forelli countered. As does the ballistics report I had run independently on the bullet that killed Officer Finch. I glanced at my father, whose face had gone pale. Camden looked between him and me, confusion evident in his expression. There's more, I said, bringing up the next file. A systematic effort to silence officers who asked questions. Falsified disciplinary reports. Accidents that weren't accidents at all. As I spoke, the boardroom door opened. Lucien entered, followed by 2 federal agents in suits. Captains Gerald Morley and James Brooks, one of the agents announced. You're under federal investigation for conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and the murder of Officer Leandra Finch. Everything happened quickly after that. Morley lunged for the laptop, but Sullivan was faster, restraining him with surprising strength. Brooks made for the door, only to find it blocked by Officer Winters and 2 uniformed officers. Outside, sirens wailed as patrol cars surrounded the building. On cue, Nova Bell's comprehensive exposé went live, documents, testimonies, and evidence streaming across social media and news outlets simultaneously. My father stood slowly, his expression unreadable. Rowena, I had no idea about any of this. The murder, the cover-up. Save it. I cut him off. You may not have pulled the trigger, but you created the system that protected men like Morley. You kept good officers down because it suited your agenda. I was trying to protect you, he insisted. No, you were trying to control me. There's a difference. As internal affairs officers, the ones Forelli had personally vetted, led Morley and Brooks away. Camden approached me, looking shaken. Ro, I didn't know about any of this. I swear. For once, his polished facade had cracked. Dad told me he was just pulling strings to keep you safe, like he did for me in business. That's the problem, Camden. Neither of you ever asked what I wanted, what I needed. Outside the precinct, a crowd had gathered, journalists, activists, and citizens drawn by the unfolding drama. Julian had organized a small rally for police reform, his supporters holding signs that read "Truth Matters" and "No Badge Above the Law." Nova Bell pushed through the crowd, microphone in hand. Detective Taylor, can you comment on the arrests? I looked at Forelli, who nodded. Today marks the beginning of real change in this department, I said, the words feeling strange on my tongue. The officers arrested today betrayed their badges and the public trust. But they don't represent all of us. Many good officers have been silenced or sidelined for trying to do the right thing. That ends now. As the crowd dispersed and the arrested officers were processed, Lucien approached me with an unexpected offer. The Bureau is creating a new task force, he said, focusing on corruption within law enforcement agencies nationwide. We need someone who understands both sides, someone who's seen the worst but still believes in the badge. He paused. They want you, Roe, as a federal liaison. I stared at him, processing the implications. Leave the department? After everything we just did to fix it? Not leave.
Bridge.
You'd work with departments like this one, implementing reforms, identifying problems before they become systemic. His eyes met mine. Real change, Roe. The kind you've always fought for. That evening, I visited Kylo in the hospital. She'd been watching the news unfold from her bed, texting encouragement throughout the day. So, she said, grinning as I entered, the lonely cop saved the day. I laughed, the tension of the past weeks finally easing. Not alone. I had help. The FBI job, you taking it? I sat on the edge of her bed. I'm thinking about it. What about you? Varelli mentioned you're on the short list for sergeant. Her eyes widened. He did. Said something about needing officers who know right from wrong. 2 days later, my parents reached out, asking to meet. I suggested a neutral location, a small park where I used to play as a child. Camden joined them, unusually subdued. I've been doing a lot of thinking, my father began, his voice lacking its usual authoritative tone. About the kind of father I've been. The kind of man. He looked older somehow, diminished. I was wrong, Rowena.
About you.
About what you do. We both were, Camden added. I spent so long measuring success by promotions and money that I missed what you were actually doing, making a difference. I didn't rush to forgive them. Some wounds were too deep for quick healing. I appreciate you saying that, but it's going to take time. Before leaving, I handed Camden a small box. Inside was my patrol officer's badge, mounted in a shadow box. What's this for? He asked. So, you never forget what it actually means, I said. You never saw what it meant to me, what it cost me. Maybe now you will. The next morning, Lucien stopped by my apartment to say goodbye. He was heading back to Washington, his investigation formally concluded. So, this is it? I asked, standing in my doorway. Another disappearing act? Not this time. He handed me a business card with his personal number. I'm just a call away. Partners, remember? There was a moment, brief but electric, where we might have rekindled what we once had. Instead, he squeezed my hand. We were each other's storm, Roe. But maybe now we can be each other's calm. After he left, I found a letter that had been slipped under my door from my mother. Unlike my father's practice speeches, her words were raw, vulnerable. I didn't know how to raise someone braver than me. I still don't. But I'm learning to be proud of the woman you've become without my help. 3 months passed like a whirlwind. I accepted the FBI liaison position but kept my detective shield with Varelli's blessing. My new role straddled 2 worlds, still a cop, but now also an advocate for systemic change. The precinct transformed under Varelli's leadership. New training protocols, accountability measures, a civilian oversight committee that Julian helped establish. Kyla recovered fully and stepped into her role as sergeant with natural authority. During her first week, she created a community police task force, inviting Julian to co-chair. Strange bedfellows, I remarked when she told me. Nah, she grinned. Just good strategy. He knows the community better than any of us. I know the department. Together, we might actually fix something. Their first initiative was a transparency program, body camera footage reviewed by a panel of both officers and community members. Complaints down 30% in the first month alone. On a crisp autumn morning, I visited Camden's new home, a modest but elegant house in the suburbs. He'd stepped down from his VP position, citing personal reasons, and started a nonprofit focused on second chances for formerly incarcerated individuals. What brought this on? I asked as we sat on his back porch. Perspective, he said simply. Watching you stand up there, knowing what it cost you, I realized I'd never stood for anything in my life. Before leaving, I handed him the shadow box with my badge.
You never saw what it meant, I said.
Now you do. He accepted it solemnly. I'll keep it in my office. Reminder of what matters. My work with the FBI task force took me across the country, departments large and small, all grappling with the same core issues.
Corruption. Bias.
Systems designed to protect the powerful. In each city, I shared Leandra's story. Sometimes in formal presentations, sometimes over coffee with skeptical officers. Her legacy became a touchstone for change. Back home, the city recognized our efforts in an unexpected way. A local artist painted a mural on the wall outside the precinct, silhouettes of officers and civilians standing side by side, with the words, "One voice can change the system," flowing between them. Nova Bell's feature article on the case won a regional journalism award. She titled it "The Lonely Cop Who Was Never Alone," chronicling not just the corruption we'd exposed, but the network of allies who had made it possible. "You've started something important," she told me during an interview for a follow-up piece. "Officers in 3 other cities have come forward with similar stories since her case broke." On the anniversary of Leandra's death, I visited her grave alone. The simple headstone, Officer Leandra Finch, who served with honor, seemed inadequate for all she'd sacrificed. I placed my badge beside her headstone, a private ritual I'd begun months ago. "We did it," I whispered. "Not just justice for you. Real change." As I stood to leave, memories washed over me. My first day as a rookie, nervous and unnoticed, Leandra's patient guidance, her unwavering belief in what policing could be. "You were right," I said to the quiet air. "One good cop can make a difference." My phone buzzed with a text from Lucien. "Package delivered to your apartment."
Urgent.
I found a manila envelope waiting at my door. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a name I didn't recognize, Andrew Pearson, and a photograph of a man in a police uniform. Below the photo, a handwritten note. "The one who started all of this is still out there." I called Lucien immediately. "Who is Andrew Pearson?" "Former police commissioner in Chicago," he replied, his voice tense. "Disappeared 5 years ago after allegations of corruption. He was Varelli's mentor. And Leandra's supervisor." I realized, pieces clicking into place. "You think he's connected to what happened here?" "I think he's the reason it happened here. Morley and Brooks were just foot soldiers, row. Pearson was the general." I stared at the photograph, studying the face of a man I'd never met but who had shaped the course of my life nonetheless. "What now?" I asked. "Now," Lucien said, "we follow the trail. This was never just about your precinct. It's a network, multiple departments, multiple states." I thought about the past year, the threats, the revelations, the hard-won victories. I thought about what Leandra would do. "I'm in," I said, already reaching for my jacket. "Where do we start?" As I headed out the door, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. No longer the outsider at Camden's party. No longer the officer passed over for promotion. No longer the lonely cop. I was Detective Rowena Taylor, and I was just getting started. I thought this was the end, but the name in that envelope, it leads somewhere darker than I ever imagined. A new chapter is beginning, one that will test everything I've built, everyone I trust. But this time, I'm not fighting alone. I'm ready. What would you sacrifice to expose the truth when the people who should love you most are the ones holding you back? Like and subscribe for more stories of redemption, justice, and finding strength in the shadows.